Hey guys! Today we're going to learn about the French Revolution. With every revolution, there has to be causes, something that convinced most of the French population at the time to turn on their own king and institution. So let's begin with long-term causes. When Louis XIV died in 1775, France was left with massive war debts. His successors, Louis XV and Louis XVI, though tried, could not solve the financial crisis and administrative problems in France. Even the many finance ministers hired did little to solve the inefficient banking and tax collecting system. So where did all the money to pay back debts come from? First of all, France had a political and social system known as the Old Regime. Under this regime, everyone is the king's subject, and they are organized into a social hierarchy known as the three estates. The first estate, aka the clergy, is made of your church officials, priests, parishes, or anyone affiliated with the Roman Catholic Church. The second estate, aka the nobility, are your nobles and aristocrats. And the third estate, making up 98% of the French population, includes peasants, middle class, and the working class. Within the old regime, the clergy and nobility owned 40% of French land and are exempt from taxes. So the third estate shoulder most of the debt payment. Imagine being a peasant in France, where you have to pay your gabelle, a salt tax, the tithe, a land tax, and also perform manorial labors for your lords. Pretty sure I would start a revolution in a heartbeat. So let's sum up the main causes. France had a financial and administrative instability, limited liberties, unfair nobility privileges, and a high tax burden on the peasants. Well, how would you solve this problem? Adding more taxes, of course, or at least that's what Louis XVI had in mind when he called the States General to assemble on May 5, 1789, because the French Parliament refused to implement his tax reforms. Essentially, the States General had the power to override the Parliament. The Estates General consists of representatives from the three estates, and each estate gets only one vote by order. This is pretty much unfair because the clergy and nobility can outvote the peasants by 2-1. Before this meeting, the French people submitted cahiers or grievance lists of wanting civil liberties, better economic conditions, and abolition of internal trade barriers such as guilds. During the meeting, a standoff occurred when the Third Estates declared themselves the National Assembly, in which was a revolutionary act because they actually had no legal power, and they were soon locked out of their meeting room by the alarmed King Louis XVI. On June 20, 1789, the newly formed National Assembly, comprising mainly of the Third Estates and some people from the other two estates, met outside an indoor tennis court and swore to never leave until a new constitution is drafted. This became known as the Tennis Court Oath. However, Louis XVI planned to dissolve the National Assembly until the storming of the Bastille occurred on July 17, 1789, in which an angry Paris mob invaded the Bastille to seize weapons and gunpowder to support the National Assembly. At this time, runaway nobles or émigrés sensed the incoming revolution and had fled France. However, in the summer of 1789, rumors spread that the king will attack the peasants. This great fear caused the National Assembly to abandon the old regime, taxes, and noble privileges on August 4, 1789. So now everyone is equal. Moreover, on August 27, 1789, the National Assembly issued the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen that guaranteed the people the rights to liberty, security, resistance to oppression, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and the right to court. Though the French Revolution advocates liberty, equality, and fraternity, women were excluded from any rights as protested and criticized by Olympe de Gouges in her Rights of Women, written in 1791. On October 1789, a group of Paris women, angered by the overpriced bread in France, marched to Versailles to demand the king and his family to move back to Paris to be closer to the people, as well as lowering bread prices. In addition, the National Assembly took this time to outlaw guilt and slavery, but not in French colonies. Okay, so the French people achieved their civil liberties and all with their National Assembly and Declaration, but what about France's financial state? Now, the National Assembly approached this financial problem by confiscating church lands and issuing assignats, or paper money, with the selling of church lands as collateral. As a result, the church lost their source of income and the government takes over to pay the clergy. On July 12, 1790, the civil constitution of clergy forced the priests and parishes to swear an allegiance to the state. These events resulted in a more secular France and made devout Catholics to resent the revolution. Even so, supporters of the French Revolution organized into a political club known as the Jacobins that influenced most of the assembly. On July 20, 1791, King Louis XVI and his family tried to flee France until they were stopped at Varennes and was forced back to Paris. This act represented betrayal and abandonment of his people on the king's part. And on September 1791, King Louis XVI accepted the Constitution of 1791 that created a constitutional monarchy with a unicameral legislative assembly. As the revolution occurs in France, other European states felt threatened because the French Revolution could serve to inspire rebellions within their own countries. In response, the King of Austria and Prussia allied to issue the Declaration of Pillnitz on August 1791 to declare their readiness to intervene to protect the French monarchy and the royal family. Eventually, the Legislative Assembly declared war on Austria on August 20, 1792, and Prussia immediately joins the war on Austria's side. The French Revolution then takes a more radical turn as the Legislative Assembly held elections to establish a new national convention. The Assembly, now known as the National Convention, declared France as a republic on September 20, 1792. The convention was split between Girondins, who felt that the revolution had gone far enough, and the Mountain, who felt the opposite. The radical Mountains found support among the sans-culottes, or the working class, known for not wearing knee breeches, a symbol of upper classes. Only one thing stood in the way of the Republic, their monarch. On January 1793, King Louis XVI was beheaded by the National Convention for treason charges. And the National Assembly continued on its reforms, such as enacting a new secular calendar that began with September 1792, year one of Republic France. All lands of the nobility was confiscated and redistributed so that all French peasants became landowners. Meanwhile, England and the Dutch Republic entered the coalition war against France for occupying the Austrian Netherlands. Yet France has to deal with internal affairs also as a counter-revolution occurs on March 1793 in Vendée. As a response, the convention appointed the Committee of Public Safety to run the government. The Committee of Public Safety was led by Maximilien Robespierre, who was the leading spokesman of the Mountain. What ensued was the Reign of Terror, a period between 1793 and 1794, when enemies of the Jacobins, such as anti-revolutionaries and Girondins, were executed immediately. The guillotine became the most famous executioner at the time. While the war continued abroad, the Committee of Public Safety issued a levée en masse that recruited all able men into the army on August 1793. With an enormous amount of soldiers, France ended the War of the First Coalition with only England left to stand by 1797. However, despite the victories, the Committee of Public Safety and Robespierre received great opposition, in which Robespierre was executed on July 28, 1794, and the Committee of Public Safety was dissolved. This became known as the Thermidorian Reaction. The convention prepared the Constitution of 1795 that created a two-house parliament and an executive branch, known as the Directory. However, after the Thermidorian reaction, inflation soared, there was major food shortages, and unrest in France that the Directory cannot resolve. The French Revolution came to an end when the General Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup d'état on November 9, 1799. Although the French Revolution that began in 1989 failed to establish a stable government and financial system in France, within 10 years it had enacted great reforms. The brutal old regime ended, and the French people had gained a taste of equality before the law and religious freedom.